All right, guys, welcome to Unit 2, Quiz 1 Study Guide. Let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to go through the even problems, which are the ones you were assigned to do. But you do have the odd problems that you can do if you want to for extra practice, and the answers are included at the end of the study guide if you want to see how you're doing. All right, so let's begin here. For numbers 1 through 8, our job is to find out which variable is the input. All right, so when we have this expression, the input is the one in parentheses, and so the answer is A for number 1. For number 3, the input is the variable that has all the numbers with it. So on this side, the variable that has all the numbers with it is the x variable. Now we're not going to say x squared because that's a number that's with the variable. We just want just the variable itself. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at number 5. The number of cockroaches depends on how many crumbs are left on the floor. The variable that comes second is the input. Now, I wasn't supposed to do number 5, but oh well, I did it. That's the answer that's on the answer key. Let's go ahead and take a look at number 6, though. Same thing. The amount of money a person gets on their tax return is a function of how many children they have. So once again, the second variable that's mentioned, how many children they have, is the input. Let's take a look at number 8. A scientist makes a graph that compares how much of a drug remains in the bloodstream over time. He puts the amount of drugs on the vertical axis, so I'll put D here, and he puts time on the horizontal axis. So now, I know some of you guys have trouble remembering which one is vertical and which one's horizontal. Vertical means up and down, and horizontal means left and right, so you want to remember that. But the drug goes on the vertical, time goes on the horizontal. The variable that's on the horizontal is our input, so the answer for number 8 is T. Let's go ahead and take a look at number 10. G of Q equals C. Q represents the number of quarters a person spends, so whatever's in the parentheses tells us how many quarters a person is spending. And C is the number of gumballs that they can buy. So this is how many gumballs it can buy. So the one in parentheses is how many quarters. C tells us how many gumballs. So our job here is to interpret this expression. 4 is the number in parentheses, so that is those are quarters. I'll put Q for quarters. And this is gumballs, so I'll put C for gumballs. Why did I put C? Because there's a C for that. So the interpretation would be when we spend 4 quarters, we get 8 gumballs. So that would be the interpretation there. So you have to know which variable's on the inside, which variable's on the outside, so you know what each of these numbers represents. All right, let's go down to number 12. The question is, determine if y is a function of x. In other words, if y is a function of x, that means y is my output and x is my input. So we can tell if y is a function of x if x is an input. So, is x an input? Well, you could tell by looking at the numbers in the row here. So long as there's no numbers that are repeated, then it can be an input. But as you can see, I have a 4 here that's repeated. This input gives me 2 different answers, 0 and 5. An input is not allowed to have more than one output with it. So, since I have some repeats here, the answer is no. Your input row cannot have repeats. It's important to pay attention to this sentence up here because this sentence tells you which one is your input and which one is your output. The one that comes first is your output. The one that comes second is your input. So that's how you know which one of these is your input and output. And from there, that's how you know what row to look out for to see and make sure that there are no repeats. All right. Now, when it comes to graphs, we have another way to tell if it's a function of x. Y is a function of x if we could do the vertical line test, and it only touches the graph once. But as you can see, my vertical line is touching my graph twice, and therefore this is also a no. All right, let's go on to number 16. Now in number 16, we need to do the domain and range. Now domain is all the possible values of x. So we're going to have a blank here, and then we're going to have an x, and then a blank here. And to do that, we're going to basically be asking ourselves, how far to the left does my graph go, and how far to the right does my graph go for x? So my graph stops going to the left right here at that x value, which is -2. And the arrow here indicates that it never stops going to the right, so we'll put an infinity. Now when a graph has infinity, you can't put an equal sign here. But for the -2, notice I do have a solid dot, so I will put an equal sign underneath of that. So this would be my domain for that graph. All right, let's go ahead and do the range as well, though. Range are all the possible values of y. So we're going to put a y here instead this time. And when it comes to the y's, we ask ourselves, what's the lowest point and what's the highest point on this graph? Well, the lowest point, once again, is this one. And that y value, not x value this time, but the y value of that point is -1. The highest value is nothing. It keeps going higher and higher and higher because there's an arrow there. So once again, we're going to put infinity there. All right, and once again, since we have a solid dot, this side will get an underline here. But infinities don't get underlines. All right. Let's go ahead and move on to number 18. Evaluate g of 3. All right, well, the problem up here tells me g of x equals y. That's important because since I see the x's in here, that means x is my input and y is my output. I guess that part's not too important, but what's important about this here is knowing that x is in parentheses, so this 3 right here is an x value. So since they gave me the number in parentheses, I'm going to look in the x row for 3. So there's 3, and then I'm going to give the answer that goes with it, which is 5. And so g of 3 is equal to 5. Now for number 20, it's different. They didn't give me the number in parentheses. They're leaving that as x, and they want us to find x. They're giving me the number outside the parentheses. Now up here you can see that's the y value. So this time I'm going to look for where y equals 2. That's right here. And the x value that goes with that is 1. So in this case, x would equal 1. That's how you evaluate and solve with tables. Let's go ahead and do some solving and evaluating with a graph now. Number 22. Once again, we have f of x. It's in the instructions above, but you can't see it on my screen, so I'll rewrite it. They tell us that this is a graph, and its function f of x equals y. So they've given me the number in parentheses, which means it's an x value. So I want to find where on my graph is there an x value that's equal to 2. Well, that would be right here at this point. At that point, I have an x value of 2, and the y value is 1. And so therefore, we want to know what's the y value that goes with this x value of 2, and the answer is 1. Let's go ahead and take a look at number 24. We're going to solve this time. This one says f of x equals 1. Now this time they've given me the number outside the parentheses, which is a y value. So I want to find where at on my graph do I have a y value of 1. Well, that's right here, actually. It's the same point. So that would mean that x equals, the x value that goes with the y value of 1 is 2. So it's interesting. These two are actually the same problem, just written in two different ways. Let's go ahead and take a look at number 26. Evaluate h of -2. Now when you see the number in parentheses, that means you're going to plug it into this equation for x. So h of x equals 2x minus 5. And we're going to plug -2 in for the x. So that would be -4 minus 5, which is -9. So there's our final answer for number 26. Let's take a look at number 28. It's a different question. Notice this time they're giving me the number, it's not inside the parentheses, but outside. In that case, we're not plugging 10 in for x. Instead, we're going to get rid of this entire piece, h of x. We're just going to get rid of that, and we're going to put 10 there because h of x equals 10, so I can just replace the whole h of x with 10. So instead of plugging in 10 for x, I'm plugging in 10 for h of x, the whole thing. And that should give me an equation that I need to solve. So on this one, I would add 5 on both sides first to solve for x. And then I would divide by 2. So you can have 15 over 2, or if you like decimals, 17.5. All right, moving along. Number 30. Let C represent how many children live in a particular city. So C of x tells me how many kids live in a city, and P represents the total number of people in the city. Our job is to write an expression that would give the number of people that are not children. All right. Well, I know that the total number of people is P. Now, I know that if I subtract from the total number of people the number of children, what would be left over is the adults, right? So the total number of people minus the total number of children would leave me with adults only, right? So P of x is the total number of people, so I would put P of x here. The number of children is C of x, and that would give me the number of adults. So our answer number 30 would be P of x minus C of x. All right, let's move on to number 32. 32 and 34 are just combining functions. So they give us two functions here, f and g. They want us to find 5 times the f function minus 4 times the g function. So let's go ahead and write that in there now. So we have 5 times the f function. Now the f function is negative t cubed minus 4 times the g function. And the g function is 3t minus 2. We're going to have to distribute first. Now if I distribute that, I'm going to get negative 5t cubed. And 5 times negative 4 is negative 20. Now when you distribute this forward, it's important to understand you're also distributing that negative there with it. So negative 4 times 3 is negative 12t. And then negative 4 times negative 2 is negative 8. And we can go ahead and simplify this because this 20 and this 8 can be combined. And so I'm going to end up with 5t cubed minus 12t. And then the 20 and the 8 make negative 28. So the idea is take the functions that they're giving you and do whatever to them that the expression is asking you to do. So in number 34, we're doing f of x divided by g of x. So the way we're going to write that is as a fraction. It's going to be f of x divided by g of x. Now, f of x is negative x minus 5. And g of x is x cubed minus 5x squared. Okay? Now, sometimes these problems can be reduced, but I'm not going to ask you to do that because we're not quite ready for that this year. So as long as you just set up the division ones, you're pretty much good to go. There's no simplifying that I'm asking you to do. All right? And that'll do it. I think that ends our study guide. So hopefully that was helpful to you guys, and we'll see you in class.